So, dear colleagues, thanks a lot joining us. We will give a couple of minutes or maybe seconds for everyone to settle down, and then we can kick off today's LGMA webinar, which will be the last of 2022. And we appreciate your time and look forward to your contributions. So just one more minute and then we will be safe to go. Good. So I think we can now kick off. Once again, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, welcome to the monthly webinar of the Local Governments and Municipal Authorities Constituency, facilitated and convened by ICLE in its capacity as the LGMA focal point. My name is Yunus Khan. I will be leading today's session, both in terms of the overall presentation, but then I will also try to moderate the dialogue among ourselves. And we are expecting our colleague Lea Renaldo could also join us during the session to provide some basic updates on the surge and the ministerial. Those who are familiar with our webinars, you may be aware that we also have inputs from our colleagues who are following the biodiversity negotiations. But you're all aware, or if you're not, the important point is that this week is the last week of the biodiversity negotiations, the COP15 in Montreal, and the whole ICLE Cities Biodiversity Center is attending this conference, and we will touch upon it as well. There's a very busy agenda there. So it's highly likely that in this morning call, we may not get participation from our colleagues because of the time zone differences, and we'll check whether they could join us in the afternoon because the summit is over. There are some now regular negotiations, but let's see how they will join us. Through this opportunity, once again, let me address that this is recorded, and you will receive the recording will be uploaded on the web, and you will receive the presentation later on. During the presentation, we also encourage colleagues, if there's any burning issue, you can type in the chat box, but we also encourage live dialogue, interactive dialogue once the presentation is over. And I remember last month we had a road car, an accident, a technical accident, where my slides were not showed up. So we checked with Kata, so hopefully this time it will be okay, but in case something problem happens, feel free to alert us. So let's go through the presentation. To those who are familiar, let's once again remind ourselves who are we, or who is the target audience of this webinar. This is prepared for and by the LGMA constituency, which is the voice of cities and regions into the UNFCCC process, the climate negotiation. Since '95, it's a body that is capturing our inputs since '95. Obviously, especially towards to the Paris Agreement, when there was a new climate regime was being designed, we were much more active because we were saying that the UNFCCC and Kyoto Protocol, there were no official role for local and regional governments. And that on the way to Copenhagen, but then to Paris, we said that let's not repeat the mistake third time, and we managed it. Paris Agreement, and that's why we are also advancing now with the multi-level action as our main focus. Our year-round engagement as LGMA constituency, which consists of more than 50 now networks of local and regional governments and their partners who are accredited to the UNFCCC, but we also reach out to others who are not necessarily an accredited body. To share our experiences. So we regularly follow the year-round negotiations. There are workshops, there are submissions. We are trying to participate in this process. We are participating in the action agenda, which is led by Champion since 15 with the Paris Agreement. We are, of course, because of our role in the process, trying to collaborate with the presidencies because they have their own authority to design the agenda and then set the scene before and during the COP. So we are trying to advance it, but of course, the difference between our regular negotiations engagement and action agenda and with the presidency is that each presidency may have a different style and a different priority, and we have to respect that. And finally, the UNFCCC process is a party-driven. What the name says, that the decisions are adopted by member state and parties to the UNFCCC, the countries, the national governments, primarily Minister of Environment or Climate or Minister of Foreign Affairs, who are the contracting bodies. So we are also trying to advance our relation with those countries who believe the value of multi-level action throughout the year, their national initiatives, but as well as their agendas in the UNFCCC process. So for the LGMA at COP27, we have made regular updates. You can track these past issues, and then you can follow all our updates there. For those who remember, on the way to COP27, at the beginning of the year, we defined our priorities. That the climate COP in Glasgow was good. It was a new momentum, and it was the second phase starting, and it should be a multi-level action delivers as our motto. We focused on NDCs. We focused on the unfinished business of the climate emergency. We aim for a new urbanization and climate ministerial, and then we want to reach with the partners in the region. What we have fine-tuned over this months of engagement, especially since June, when we started to work with the presidency for an initiative, we called our priorities as that we want the surge initiative to be endorsed. We want the UNFCCC party to welcome the urbanization and climate ministerial, and we want climate energy finance, the climate emergency finance, particularly Article 6.8 and subnational development and project pipeline facility. This was our axis of our engagement. Meanwhile, let me also address that my colleague Lea Ronaldo from UNAM had already joined us. So in the next couple of slides, when we go through particularly our agenda towards COP28, in the section on operationalization of the surge, and of course updates, follow-up from the ministerial, we would invite Lea to provide her input. So thanks a lot, Lea, joining us. This was the slide that we used last month, immediately 2 days after COP27 was concluded. So we mentioned that it was a unique COP with all its challenges. It was the first COP was hosted by South since 2016. The cover decision, we had positive and negative feedbacks. Of course, there was numerous reference to transformative agendas, especially the root cause of climate emergency, whereas there was not a direct reference to multi-level action that we were hoping to get because of the way the ministerial was rolled out. It was not so easy because we also have noticed none of the initiatives by COP27 was also addressed in the cover decision, but still we are happy the multi-level action is still kept there, even though it moved from the preamble to the unoperated paragraph. Loss and damage was critical for us, and we are very happy our constituency like Scotland has played a key role, and we are expecting that because the wording and the vision of loss and damage is forward-looking rather than backward-looking, it will be creating a momentous changes in especially non-climate community, especially multilateral trade and banking systems. So that's also something very positive because these are the areas that climate emergency should be taken into account. We have seen global goal on adaptation, reference to cities and culture. Article 6.8, we are still hopeful that sustainable urbanization will be issued. So in conclusion, actually, we are saying that these are the two twins, COP26 and COP27, ambition and justice. So that now it's time for implementation. Finance, governance, and capacity building will be the key players, and the implementation depends on it. Those who are in the LGMA and then COP27 are 90% of our engagement was in the blue zone, and in the blue zone, our pavilion, the multi-level action pavilion, was our home for cities and subnationals and their partners. We are really grateful for our continuity of our spirit of collaboration with Scotland as host, but also with the Egyptian government and all the LGMA family. We are assuming that there were more than 500 delegations at COP27, including more than 150 local and regional leaders. We had at the pavilion more than 50 sessions, 45 partners, but across the COP, we were around 200 or so events. And of course, our biggest center of gravity of our work was the surge, which is connected to Ministerial Meeting on Urbanization Climate Change, which was supported by UN Habitat. As you have seen, the surge has been recognized as one of the largest coalition of urban community and climate community in this space for sustainable urbanization. It is really the first time that such a holistic approach has been developed, and it is also good that this overlaps with the implementation agenda of the new Paris Agreement, as well as it comes up at the same time when IPCC Summary for Urban Policymakers was also launched. So it really gives us a very nice opportunity to elevate our work towards climate emergency as such. We were very happy throughout the meeting, strong support and before from the Global South. But at the meeting, we also have received statements from US, Japan, where they expect or they wish to see synergy between their national initiative. Japan was in fact one of the first global north in the global north who has been endorsing the surge, and there was a unique way of support from the Dutch delegation. Obviously, Mayor Dijksma as our special envoy and the Minister of Environment made a very nice presentation or appearance, which shows really the value of a mayor and a minister, and that they're acting together. And we look forward to replicating such examples. And particularly, again, supranational initiatives like EU Mission Innovation, Carbon Neutral Cities Mission is also part of this process, Urban Transition Mission, sorry. And one of the surprising statements came from the multilateral development banks announced by EBRD that they are looking forward to support, which was, of course, very valuable because that was not happened in other climate action initiatives in the past. So we would continue, as we said, Leah will provide more updates on the surge. Endorsement form is open. We have the surge hub, which is in the LGMA website, where we will keep the updates and the links so that the momentum goes further. Of course, surge was not the only one we were engaged, because the difference of the surge and the other initiative, this was the one that was held in the meeting rooms area, and it was together with Ministerial of Urbanization. But throughout this 12 days and extended 14 days, we had participated at the with our statements at the plenaries of COP. We have participated in several discussions like finance, like dialogue with the UNFCCC Executive Secretary. We had delivered a high-level segment statement by our governor from Kenya. Obviously, there was a very nice delegation of LGMA at the Ministerial on Urbanization, but the closing and opening of the Global Climate Action was also with speakers from Tokyo to Lusaka who were sharing their experiences. We also had a dialogue with the US Secretary General, and our final closing remark was delivered by European Commission of Regions Representative Mayor of Autun, Mr. Chauvet. Here comes the one that is new, that we have been, I mean, this was like a refreshment of what has happened at COP27 and what was the initial factual outcomes. And of course, you have received now a lot of analysis are going forward. What we as ICLE would like to share with you as really after the dust has settled down, what has really happened at COP27. So here is the three takeaways that we would like to share with you. And of course, all of our LGMA partners are also sharing their own analysis, and we will be very happy to share this also with all of you. So the good thing is that now climate action has a solid footing on 2 feet. One is climate ambition at COP27 and climate justice at COP27. You can think about that. This is like a baby born, the Paris Agreement, and it is now firmly step up. It obviously it's very hard for any human being to run fast without a solid 2 feet. And of course, we have seen there are numerous efforts to support these kind of things. But it was, even though COP27 was announced as the implementation COP, it was very clear from the Global South that implementation cannot be discussed without the climate justice being added. So it's very good that now it is there. The climate justice is there. So the solid basis, the ambition announced at COP26 and Glasgow Climate Pact, and climate justice and loss and damage fund is there. Now it's time to accelerate. It's time to accelerate into emergency mode of action. There's no excuse. There's nothing that is now waiting to be sealed. Obviously, we will see how loss and damage fund will evolve. It's a negotiation. It will take some time. There will be frustrations, but there's no way back. It will always be forward. And in fact, this is the second point, which is the good thing, is that we have a solid framework for climate ambition towards for climate action into emergency mode. The essential thing is that none of these things will be done without multi-level action. It's very clear. The way loss and damage, look at how Scotland has helped this. The way surge, urbanization, material stocktake, Article 6, all agendas have a reference to local and subnational action, or that there is also reference to sustainable urbanization in some sense, or linkage to it. And beyond these initiatives, there have been lots of examples of very innovative ideas. We have seen USA in Inflation Reduction Act, which is now followed by a new initiative. We have seen EU mission transformation, urban transformation mission. We have seen Japan now building up more and more regional decentralized and decarbonized regions. So there's a lot of examples coming up. And so it's very clear now we have a new normal in the climate action for the national and global level, is that multi-level action empowered by transformative impacts of sustainable urbanization. This is now a concrete reality that we cannot ignore anymore. So there was one chat box. Okay, great. Bernard, I think is already Bernard Bart from UN Habitat is also with us. I assume he was already a panelist now. So together with Leah, probably he will intervene in the next couple of seconds. Actually, it's the number 14 slide. The inevitable. What is the inevitable is that it is for sure that this UNFCCC process and the COP, both in terms of our engagement as local members, but also stakeholders, but also decision-making process, has to be now completely overhauled. It has to adjust to the 21st century. It is very clear that the process we are in, 45,000 people traveling for 2 weeks, and then by the time we learn which meeting is taking which space, the COP is over. The same goes to COP presidency. The same goes to all the expectation of observers. It really simply is not reflecting to the needs of this climate action era in the emergency mode. So we expect, and that was also addressed by us in numerous interventions. We have heard from the UNFCCC Secretary, this is inevitable, that things have to change. And that will give a lot and a significant number of opportunities for us, hopefully, because change may not always have to be for the good. It could also go worse. So let's hope that we will not go below where we are now today. But it is very clear it may not happen immediately. Some things may happen immediately, but we're expecting around 2 or 3 years' time, probably the COP in 2025 will very likely be much different space and shape than what we have used to be familiar with. Under this condition, what is now expecting us in the next couple of 12 months in 2023? On the UNFCCC side, there will be numerous submissions. There will be a technical meeting in Bonn in June. There will be regional climate weeks, which will also be very important, but we don't know the dates. Any of those dates are not clear. And we also would like to encourage our partners in the global north that they should also encourage to have their own regional climate weeks. For the moment, it's only for the global south. And in this new era, we cannot afford, but we will come back to that because there are some interesting opportunities. We will see how presidency will shape in terms of their team and their relation with our constituencies, as well as the action agenda champions. In June is important because there's also the last technical dialogue stocktake. We will get back to it again. In the UN side, compared to 2022, we're a bit better because there's not so many agendas. Last year, we've had 4 COPs at UN Environment Assembly and so many activities. This year, we have basically one water conference in March, the second UN Habitat Assembly in June in Nairobi, at the same time with the UN Climate Conference, and our colleagues Leah and Bernard may touch upon this. We have SDG 11 being discussed in the HLPF, and we have a UN high-level week in September. Presumably, that's much less in terms of intensity. In the global perspective and the LGMA mobilization, we have a serious agenda with G7 and G20. This is the year of Asia. Both Japan and India have a strong vision for engaging with cities and sustainable urbanization. Urban 7 Mayor Summit is already announced to be held in March. The G7 Summit is in May, and then there will be G7 Urbanization Ministerial in July and G7 Climate and Environment meeting, particularly focusing on urbanization as well in April. G20, we know there will be Urban Mayors Summit, Urban U20 Mayors Summit in July, and the Leaders Summit is in September. In between, we know there will not be an urbanization minister at the G20, but there's a working group already going forward. While Asia will be very heavily involved in this kind of G7 and G20 track, the other parts of the world is also very interesting, especially in the US. There's a big event happening in the end of April, the Cities Summit of Americas. That will be a very interesting mobilization. This will also be supported by the European level. There's also an urban summit being planned in June. Of course, there in cities, we will try to use it because last year we had the global conferences of the big networks, so World Urban Forum. So it was a very busy year for our constituency, for our internal process as well. But in 2023, we are much less loaded. This gives us more opportunities to focus on implementation. And obviously, Urban October, we want to frame it around stocktake process. So the last slide I will show at this stage is our ideas about how we can elevate the LGMA, the vision of multi-level action delivers into the 2023 agenda. So the first, number 1, is operationalization of surge. The second is on stocktake for climate emergency. And the third one is accelerate UNFCCC engagement throughout the year. I have some notes on the operationalization of surge, but I rather prefer to give the floor now to our colleagues, Leah and Bernard, so that they first probably give some insight or reflections from what happened in COP27, because they have been involved in the presidency, and the follow-up, and maybe some ideas on the way forward. Bernard and Leah, since you're both of here, feel free to both of you to decide how to take the lead from now on. I see Leah already using her background screen, so it seems that she is the spokesperson. So Leah, welcome.
Yes, good morning, Yunus. Good morning, everybody. Also, warm welcome from my side, and thanks for having both Bernhard and myself on this webinar. And also maybe to briefly say a big thank you for all of you here for your strong support for the ministerial meeting, for Surge, and for really this road to COP27, and also now the operationalization of Surge afterwards. Apologies, Christmas is just around the corner. So maybe just a very brief reflection on both Surge and also the ministerial meeting from my side, and I'll let Bernhard then also jump in afterwards. I mean, Yunus, you mentioned there've been now 120 organizations, member states, NGOs, and so on who've endorsed Surge after COP. We've had several more who've endorsed the Surge, which is of course fantastic. So the momentum keeps building, which is a great news. So of course there is still the journey towards Surge has not stopped on the 17th of November with its launch, but that's really only the beginning. So of course also an open invitation to keep endorsing Surge, keep signing up for Surge. We are only getting started with this, and maybe then So that's on Surge, and then also on the ministerial meeting, just a brief reflection. Yunus already mentioned it. I mean, we had first of all, a completely full room, so much interest, which is absolutely fantastic. We've had several member states who just showed up without even saying that they would be there. There was so much interest in speaking that unfortunately not everybody got a chance to speak, which was not ideal, but also shows us that there's so much appetite and interest for such a ministerial meeting to happen in the future and to go forward. I think we counted approximately, it was well over 50 member states representatives or ministers or appointed representatives present in the room, which is of course an absolutely fantastic outcome. And we've had some really strong intervention. Yunus, you already said, some strong endorsements during this ministerial meeting that really have given us, a good strong push, not only for Surge, but of course also for the ministerial meeting. So let me just briefly say, after COP is always before the next COP for the people in the climate space. But just for the wrap up of this COP, I think there's still a little bit that people have expecting, especially coming out of this ministerial meeting. So there will be a summary of statements that we're currently collecting that will be shared with everybody that's coming, that has attended, and of course will be made publicly available. So that should hopefully be out before Christmas. It's taking us a little bit to get all these statements in, doing some translations and so on. But that will be published. We want to showcase the support and all the endorsements that we've received, and that also includes some statements from some participants who unfortunately could not speak during the ministerial meeting. And then of course we're also hoping to have a little bit more information about the next steps on Surge communicated with everybody before Christmas as well. So that's now just a little bit of the wrap up of these two aspects. And I'm happy to take one step back and looking forward, as I said, after COP is before COP, towards COP28. I think there is, first of all, a very big interest from the COP28 presidency to continue existing initiatives and build on already ongoing existing work. So that's of course a great sign for us and a great opportunity to push the Surge initiative and get the interest of the UAE also for COP28 on Surge. And then we will be working towards the second ministerial meeting with the UAE COP28 presidency, but we're also seeing how can we make sure that this ministerial meeting on urbanization and climate change will be anchored better within the UNFCCC processes. This is not going to happen overnight, but it's a process, it's a road that we are engaging in, and having these anchor zones, these different events that you, Yunus, also mentioned throughout 2023 will help us to also make that happening. So we are hopeful for another ministerial meeting at COP28. Of course, bigger, better, and so on as a vision. And then maybe as a brief reflection on what are the next steps for Surge is we've had a discussion here. We have these 5 working groups. There are some co-chairs and co-leads for these different working groups. And we're hoping to start working with these co-leads to think about what would be some next steps for these specific working groups in itself, but then also thinking about how can we link build the foundation of Surge a bit stronger, linking Surge more specifically, highlighting these opportunities to address urbanization and multi-level climate governance, thinking about how can we link cities and regional governments more strongly in the NDC processes. How can we how can we link such a Surge initiative also with a ministerial meeting? And then, this entire foundation that needs to happen in parallel with work on the working groups. I know there's been several people who've reached out saying, when can we get started? And we're all also eager to get started. So there's also some conversation ongoing with the COP27 presidency of how how to think about their engagement going forward. What are some priorities from their side? That I mean, this is their initiative as well, or what they would like to see going forward. I'll stop here and ask Bernhard to come in case there's anything I've missed and any other reflections on his side.
If there is time, Yunus, but just to also thank the LGMA community and of course Yunus as the face and representative for the partnership, both for Serge and the ministerial meeting. And Leah has provided quite a detailed overview in terms of the engagement, but I would just like to stress the last point again. Of course, both the Search Initiative and the ministerial meetings were COP27 initiatives. For us to take those forward requires now a very good communication with the incoming presidency and of course the Egyptian presidency. That includes, for example, the report of the ministerial meeting. So yes, we are hopeful to have this out this year, but of course it needs to be issued also by the presidency as the host and convener of this, and we have just supported independent of maybe the types of engagements that we have provided collectively. Now, I would say also that the Search Initiative is maybe a little bit more complex to communicate to the COP28 presidency and picking this up. But we will start, or we have in a way started this already. And I think this is critical to make those standalone initiatives that have a life beyond the very strong linkage to the COP27 presidency. While at the same time, of course, I think we are all very, very clear on the importance of the linkage of the ministerial meeting to the UNFCCC processes and the search to the future COP presidencies and maybe also the UNFCCC processes through the ministerial meeting. But this weaning off and further engagement is relatively complex and work in progress, but I think we are very positive that we will have that all in place. Yunus, you have mentioned many of the key events in this until the next COP. Maybe just to mention that on our agenda, there are a number of housing and urban ministerial meetings at the regional level, including, for example, next week in the Arab region, which we see as particularly important in terms of handing over the baton from the housing ministry in Egypt to the one in the UAE. But there are others in other regions, and so we have started using that venue also to make those ministries as aware as possible of the ministerial meeting and its importance. So I leave it at that.
Thanks, Leah and Bernhard. Through this opportunity, also let me once again congratulate to you, but also in addition to Serin, who was also one of our team members, and also your regional office in Egypt, but across the whole UN Habitat leadership. But without your personal commitment and dedication, we really wouldn't be able to reach to this point. So once again, thanks to all your efforts. It was a remarkable experience, and I think, as Leah mentioned, with just starting, it's not the end. In fact, just we are hoping that this will be a journey that we'll walk through together. And Bernhard, I'm very happy that you have mentioned that this relation to the SPA 58, sorry, to the president, COP28 president, is very important. We just would like to add 2 points, and maybe not necessarily now, because I think it's also making what will be the role that UN Habitat Assembly will play, and how will we make the synergy between SPA 58. I think will be an important point. We are ready to help and contribute. More importantly, or let's say not more important, but equally importantly, we have seen over this the action agenda. As you have noticed, there are several initiatives from Egypt, but not all of them were in the action agenda compilation. We had Surge, we have Lotus, and a number of others. Plus, there is an announcement of the breakthrough agendas by non-party stakeholders and by the national governments. We would like to make sure, I think we have to make sure how Surge is connected to all these, because that's also an important area. I must confess, because of our focus to the Surge side itself, it's especially for the breakthrough agenda, it seems that something was, maybe we were not able to catch up. So it's time to digest and make sure, and of course, here, the new champion from the Emirates will be very key. We will see how it will evolve. It was good that Dr. Mohayyed was with us at the ministerial. He was addressing us, so that's good that he was putting this ownership. So I think there's a lot of opportunities to go forward. So I'm sure there may be some contributions from our colleagues, but let's proceed. And I hope you have time, Bernard and Leah, because there are a couple of points I'd like to address more. But just to be on the safe side, maybe before going to the stock take and other agendas, is there anything from any of the participants of this webinar, either to share your inside reflections or express any core points for clarification to Bernard and Leah, just for the Surge and Ministerial at this stage? If not, we can come back to this again. But I just wanted to give this opportunity. You can raise your hand if you wish, you can intervene. But at this point, I don't see any reaction yet. But Bernard, I assume you are still with us, because we will continue until the hour. So there may be a kind of come back to this agenda in the next couple of minutes. So yes, we said that multi-level action delivers still is valid, because it's really the right moment to focus on it. And for us, the multi-level action delivery starts with Surge, because, as we said, this is the first time such a holistic and inclusive approach was on the stage. And you have heard from colleagues from your Habitat, there's a strong buy-in from the presidencies. So we will advance. So this, it will not be something that we will forget. We will just, on the contrary, it will be a primary agenda for LGMA as well. Second, Surge is important, but this year, the climate agenda, the climate community will focus on stocktake. And we have been asking for stocktake process to be receiving inputs from the local and subnational level. This is what we achieved in June in Bonn. So we have time now to turn this into action. And in fact, this is what we have also mentioned. The UNFCCC, the Secretariat, and others are also expecting that at the moment, stocktake is focusing on the technical dialogues, which will finish in June. But there's a need to put into a momentum for political dialogues, and it's exactly what the local stocktakes, the regional stocktakes can present, and that's why we're branding it as stocktake for climate emergency. So there's a very strong expectation that our input to the stocktake can change the course of how the stocktake process will evolve. In that sense, we suggest for kind of because we had this experience of Talanoa dialogues, and those who remember, we were convening such meetings. I think there should be a change in the way these dialogues are now held, and we would suggest that we, this time, because the Talanoa dialogues was mainly led by the networks. So in this case, we would think that we should ask maybe our city halls, the city administration or regional governments, to step up, that they say that I am convening my cities, my region stocktake, and that the LGMA partners, depending on who is there on that region of this, on that country, we could help them to convene this. And so that we could say that the debate should be focusing on these three main axes, which is national, local, and climate justice. But it is an initiative taken up by the local governments. And we would expect, of course, it's not easy, that's why I would like to roll out a campaign style by the beginning of the year as quick as possible, so that we receive interest, and then we then say that who wants to support which city or region. That could be a moment. There are some cities and regions who are much more advanced, and they will be very likely to be running faster. We would like to make use of the Earth Day, particularly because Earth Day Network is also helping us. We would make sure the June session, so it will be another milestone, and we'd like to make sure that Urban October, is also the momentum. The advantage of Urban October is that this year, the time span between Urban October and COP was very short. So it was immediately rolling out. So now we have at least 1 month. So imagine in September, we have the UN high-level meeting. There will be big debates on SDGs and whatever. If we can make use of Urban October also, and it may be a kind of a multi-level stock take, and then we can bring this to Dubai. So that is our expectation. And the third area, so we have search, we have stock take, and the third is UNFCCC engagement. And in that sense, of course, now, as you have seen, there are so many topics are now focusing on cities and regions. We have to be much more active throughout the year, especially at the beginning of the year with the submissions. Loss and damage is, of course, important. We would like to support more Scottish government. You may remember we had a dialogue with the LGMA and other constituencies in COP. We would like to build upon that. Obviously, Article 6.8 and other issues will be coming onto the table. But now we would like to just reserve a couple of minutes for a very hot debate in the UNFCCC process, which is the conflict of interest. And this will be the last part. By the way, I forgot to mention that under this condition, we have defined our calendar of activity webinars for every month. We will share this with you again, and the registration links that you use will continue to be the place where you can register yourself. We are also discussing internally within ICLEI, but also based on the feedback received with so many partners, and considering that the beginning of the year and throughout the year is equally important than the COP itself. You remember last year we were focusing on the pavilion and the design of the ministerial. Now, since the action at the ground is more important, maybe we could use the LGMA mailings that we use for the pavilion in a much more regular, like bi-monthly, so that we keep the momentum going forward. We'll share with you our vision on how to manage this process, but we believe there's a value we could use this, and that the mailings could be receiving input from all the LGMA partners, and that we can turn this into a new way of engagement. So, conflict of interest. Just a second to take a deep breath on what has happened so far. The UNFCCC Secretariat has started a process to enhance observer engagement. One of the topics was conflict of interest, which was raised by several constituencies. The conflict of interest of fossil fuel lobby intervening in the UNFCCC process. And during this consultation, there was a strong submission from 5 constituencies to ask for an exclusion of fossil fuel observers from the UNFCCC process in its entirety. This was not fully supported by all the constituencies, and the Secretariat also was saying that there should be procedural mechanisms to discuss this. So their discussion, and the discussion evolved into a kind of an interim, let's say, for example, step where maybe Secretariat could ask all the observers to sign a declaration of interest. So that before exclusion, that they start with a transparency of interest. This was the idea, was that constituencies, those 5, pushed it to be started to be implemented at COP27, but because it was such a short notice, it was practically not possible. At the COP, there was big debate by these 5 constituencies, especially for the fossil fuel lobby being very active at COP. And of course, there are discussions how this will shape in the COP28, because Egypt was a country that is relying on gas, but Emirates is even more, because they're relying on both gas and fuel oil, or fossil fuel oil as in entirety. So it's even more stronger there. But it is a fact of this host country. And there has been a lot of discussion about the 600 plus representative of fossil fuel lobby delegations at COP, which is the highest number so far. Yes, true, but let's not forget the COP in Sharm el-Sheikh was also the highest number of participation. So it's the whole number has increased. 49,000 of people were at COP27 registered. And even in the LGMA constituency, we are saying that we were more than 500 plus. So this 600 plus, personally speaking, is not extremely big. This doesn't mean that their influence are different, but it's just the fact that the 600 is not the whole observers into the COP process, and all constituencies have also increased their participation because the whole COP27 participation numbers are increased. And let's also be realistic. In the UNFCCC process, the role and the mechanisms that a fossil fuel lobby can play, and it's not too much different than what if LGMA or IPOs or trade unions can do. If you look at biodiversity convention, for example, any observer can submit even textual proposals if it's endorsed by CBD parties. These are not the cases in the UNFCCC. So the decision-making process is still in the hands of the parties, and the parties are those who are in the OPEC, the oil producing companies, state-owned enterprises. So even if you exclude the oil lobby from the observers, they are in the rooms, and they are even empowered as well. So what we also are saying that the observer engagement is just one part of the puzzle, or one piece of the puzzle. We have called for a complete redesign of the whole UNFCCC process, be it logistically, be it technically and politically. So what has happened that after COP, there was a call on this conflict of interest and transparency of interest. The proposal that this conflict of interest could be mainly discussed as an agenda item of the SPs. Therefore, there should not be any action to be taken up by this observer constituency process. That was the position of Secretariat. This was not welcomed by these 5 constituents, so they decided not to intervene into this process. They stepped out of this dialogue. So the UNFCCC will continue to the consultations, but these 5 constituents also made it very clear that they will follow additional agendas. So what is their proposal at the moment? This is important because now there's also a huge now pressure about what is LGMA saying on that process. So there is a document I will share with you later on in the follow-up, but officially there is a submission that is defined what does conflict of interest mean. It is in entirety, it says GHG emissions intensive industries, entities, or products. So there's a group defined that if any observer is engaged or affiliated or receiving funds from this group of products or services or communities, they should be, in the short or long or medium term, be excluded from UNFCCC processes. The way they define interest is any direct or indirect financial contributions from those products, services, GHG emissions intensive, and those who are driving the use and expansion of those sectors. And then affiliation is any type of relation, partnership, employment. So honestly speaking, when I read this statement, I feel anyone under the sky, anyone under the sun can easily be connected to a fossil fuel industry intensive process. This includes mayors and governors from those regions who are producing oil or coal or gas because they are affiliated directly and indirectly with financial contributions because they are paying taxes, or there is a relation with them. So honestly speaking, if this definition is strictly applied, none of the LGMA participants can even attend the COPs. I mean, this is such a big definition, and it doesn't apply to only LGMA. If this is applied, there's really no one attending the COPs. I mean, this is after reading what's going on. So it's not a statement as LGMA, but it is really my personal thinking. So what they want is that anyone should sign a declaration like that, and that this should be followed by the Secretariat later on. Obviously, they were also very clear, the constituents were very clear that this is their proposal, and with the consensus-based agreements, they are ready to expect some negotiations and some changes, but it is what it is. So we have to be starting to be careful thinking about this as well, and what the LGMA is discussing and saying about the conflict of interest. My final point, as I said, there's no one from the Biodiversity Center from ICLE, but what is going on now in Montreal is very interesting, which is, I must confess, well ahead of what we're doing in the UNFCCC because of the evolution of their engagement in the process because of the biodiversity secretariat and the biodiversity parties' openness to engage local regional governments. So it's not just that they want more and they get more, but it is the parties of the Biodiversity Convention who are also very, very open to this process. So there is now a post-2020 global biodiversity framework. Officially, it will be adopted by the end of COP, and there are 22 targets, and one of those targets is on green urban spaces. And the text is really very good, and the good news is that there's no brackets there. So if this global framework is adopted, it may be possible that the final document, the target 12, may be target 5 or target 21, I don't know. But there is very likelihood that a reference to urban green spaces will be part of the global biodiversity framework. This is one good news. Second, that there's a 10-year action plan through the Edinburgh process. It is now reviewed by parties. They have discussed on it, and all the brackets are removed, and they have adopted. So the text, the conference room papers, that the parties adopt this plan of action, and there's a very strong reference to cities with nature, regions with nature as the monitoring mechanism or platform, which is again LGMA-driven processes. And there's also strong references to standalone advisory committees of local governments as well as sub-national governments. Finally, this year at COP, Biodiversity COP, is that there's a first pavilion as part of the 7th summit. And that's also a very interesting experience. This is something that is also being driven by the experience of the biodiversity climate conference as well. It turned out to be really very powerful. It's still going on. There are still sessions. One good news is that the Egyptian COP27 presidency was represented by Ambassador Ayman Amin, where he linked the Surge initiative to the biodiversity process, which is again very encouraging for us, which I feel, as far as I know, it's one of the very few, if not the only, occasions where presidency is continuing to work with the stakeholders after COP27 as well. So these are our inputs, coverage of our final webinar of the 2022. As we said, we have a long way to go. Multi-level action level is still valid. We will focus on operationalization of Surge. We will focus on stock take, and we will be focusing on negotiations, including conflict of interest and redesign of the UNFCCC process. With this in mind, I'd like to give the floor for the last couple of minutes for other colleagues if they wish to share any insight, any inputs, so that we can take away from our side for the discussions for next year. As we said, the next LGMA webinar is on the 18th of January, so that we will kick off the next year again. So yeah, let me give a break, and please feel free to raise your hands or immediately intervene directly. Kata, I don't see any hands raised or anyone chat box at this stage, correct?
Yeah,
Do I
correct.
miss
Me neither.
Leah and Bernard, any closing remarks would you like to share, taking into account overall what we have discussed? Just a final opportunity. Oh, Kata, Pablo says that chat box is disabled.
Yeah, I just saw that, but otherwise the Q&A box should be working. That's what we
Pablo,
normally
if you
use.
want, you can also intervene verbally. I'm sorry, I was not aware that the chat box was disabled. Maybe that's one of the reasons why.
But the Q&A is working,
Yeah.
so that's
So Q&A,
fine.
exactly, SDG Summit. Yes, that is what we have mentioned at the HLPF at the technical level, focusing on SDG 11, and UN high-level meetings in New York in September is including SDG Summit. And obviously, in the SDG Summit, in addition to SDG Summit, we also have to be aware there is a preparatory meeting by the UN Secretary General for the Summit of the Future that will be coming in 2024. And that is also important because as along this Summit of the Future, we are assuming there will be an announcement finally on the UNSG Advisory Board for Local and Regional Government, which we have worked a lot with UCLG, Global Task Force, and all the others. And UNHabitat was the co-chair of this task force under the UNSG office. And we raised this issue when UN Secretary General was meeting with the observer constituencies on the 18th of November in Sharm el-Sheikh with Mayor Dijksma. Pablo, I don't know whether you have anything to add in that sense. When we can expect this body to be announced. So in the New York September agenda, we will both have a SDG summit, but also a debate on how the Summit of the Future will be prepared, and the outcome, one of the outcome will be Pact for the Future, and UCLG already announced UCLG Pact for Future at the UCLG Congress in November this year. So there are a lot of things that now we have to make the connections. So thanks, Pablo, for mentioning this.
Sure, yes. No, I don't have much more to that. It was just making a mention to this, of course, and I wanted to build this narrative that, yeah, that it's good that we planned the work for this year, but on 2024, we do have the Summit for the Future, and it will be a very important milestone within the UN process and the SDG process. So I really want us to also keep that milestone in mind and see how the LGMA can really fit into this, and see exactly when this advisory group will be finally announced. We are in the works of that, and of course we will keep you informed.
And thank you, Pablo. Of course, again, the role that the UN Habitat Assembly will play is also very huge. Just for those who may not be familiar, Bernard, of course, and Leah, you are in the heart of it, and of course, UCLG, but just for a kind of a recap, UN Habitat Assembly is a result of Habitat 3. So in this era of 2015 onwards, instead of having every 20 year or every 10 year a big summit, these major processes have decided to have their assembly. So the first one was UN Environment Assembly, which is convening every 2 years by UN Environment Program in Nairobi. After Habitat 3, the process was rephrased so that instead of Habitat 4, there will be UN Habitat Assembly, again by a renewed structure of the governance of UN Habitat bodies, executive board. So this UN Habitat Assembly will become every 4 years. So the first one was in 2019, and immediately after, of course, there was the preparations, but there's also the period for COVID. But now officially UN Habitat Assembly is in 2023. So the next UN Habitat Assembly will be 4 years later. Obviously, the longer the time frame, the bigger the importance of the outcome of the event that will be coming. So let's remember, the World Cities Day, especially in 2021, was in Egypt. We were saying that time for multi-level action will come as the same day of the World Cities Day in Glasgow. Then we have World Urban Forum, and that was connected to the initiative of the Surge. It was the first kickoff. We had Egypt, COP, and we had the Surge and Urbanization Ministerial. We will have UN Habitat Assembly 4 years later, finally, and then in between, we will have COP28, hopefully with the Ministerial and UN Secretary General's initiative going on with this future of the summit, Summit of the Future, and a task force, which is led by UN Habitat and UN Secretary General's office. Then we will have hopefully second ministerial in Dubai, and then we'll go back to Egypt again for the World Urban Forum 12, which is happening every 2 years. So these are mechanisms that we can build upon to strengthen our work on the multi-level action and sustainable urbanization as the new normal in the second phase of the Paris Agreement. So a lot of things we have to take into account, but I think we are good to advance because of our achievements and because of our solidarity and because of our passion and vision. So through this opportunity, the last minute, I'd like to thank you all, to all LGMA partners throughout the year, of course, but also in Glasgow. The dedication, the motivation, and the collaboration across the constituency was remarkable. I'm very happy that we are advancing our course of collaboration, and look forward to another exciting year in the months ahead. And through this opportunity, for those who are taking your time for a break, we wish you the best. Spend your time with your families and beloved ones, detox yourself, come back with a renewed commitment at the beginning of the year, and then we will proceed further. Thank you all, and have a nice day to all.